can smell lilies. Oh, they're there. They're lovely, aren't they? Nice. Mind you, it's a bit warm for them in here.
It's a MirandaNet thing.
It is, yeah. No, I think there's always lilies, actually. Do I need to be some... Yes, would you like to... What are you doing to do to me?
I can't stay because I've got another event to go to.
Ooh, dig you.
Yeah.
Who's going
Which
to
has
speak?
got free beer in it.
Free beer?
Oh.
You're staying put. Is there somebody from Iris going to be saying something in this session?
Graham's going to join in.
Graham's going to join in. That's all right.
He's going to be around, but you do need to pass the mic. That's the only thing I'm.
This mic.
That one. Yeah, because otherwise, because you see, it follows. So I can. Yeah.
Oh, so that people can be seen.
Yeah,
yes, I see.
Otherwise,
and is that what's being live streamed?
No. There's another camera here that's doing this live stream. This is just recording the session. It's all, yeah?
My God, yes. Okay, right. Do I sit there? I've got 3 things to remember here.
And what I've done is on the concept map, I've put your slide presentation.
Oh, thank you. That's
so
very
people
kind.
Can access that.
Yeah, that's lovely. Lovely. What time? We're starting now, aren't we? In a minute.
Yeah, I don't think we'll get anybody joining us because
it's such a funny time.
5:30, people are either finishing their work or travelling.
Yeah. Well, it's all right. We'll see.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh. Don't. You're being cheeky. It was the way you did that, actually. It was very naughty. I've just phoned Catherine. To see where she is. But I got her voicemail. So whatever, we'll see.
Just get on, shall we?
Yep.
Why do you think she's...
No, I think she's in she's been moved into a funny room today, and she was very cross about it. So she's probably trying to get from A to B at the moment. Yeah. So are you going to do the introduction, or do I do the introduction?
Everybody's sick of me. Why don't you do
They're sick of you? I'm sure they're not.
I'm sure they are.
All right. Tell me when you want to start, Theo.
Well, I'll just get started.
Yeah.
If I can get going again.
We'll give it another little try just in case. Hello. We're going to talk to people that we know about where we're up to. I'm just going to wait for Theo to have one more try.
Well, I've done 6 days, but in that time, because it's not a big country, we managed to go down and see the whole of Lebanon. I intend to get the logo.
You like our logo? Thank you. It's a tick. Do you see? It's a tick. I think we're ready to start. So do feel free to join us, and we may get some people joining us online, but otherwise we're going to start proceedings in the room now. So hello and welcome to this group. For those of you that don't know me, I don't think we've met. Hello, I'm Rachel Jones, and I'm Education Director of the Elliot Foundation, which is the lovely logo up there. And we've not met either, I don't think. What's your name? Oh, from Lebanon. Fantastic. And who are you?
Vaughan.
Vaughan from?
Northwood College.
Oh, right, okay, good. And I think I recognise everybody else is here, so I can call you in. Okay, so we've got some time this evening to talk about what makes a good ICT professional development programme, which I know lots of us have talked about lots of times before, but I think it's just worth kind of thinking about where we're at. We're going to be joined, I hope, at some time soon by Catherine Howard from Steljes, and she leads on the training and consultancy arm of Steljes, so I think she'll be a good addition to our group. But I thought, if you don't mind, I'd like to just kick off with what we're doing at the Elliot Foundation. I've only got about 3 slides, so I won't go on forever. But for those of you who don't know the Elliot Foundation, we're a relatively new multi-academies trust. We were in set-up until last summer and actually opened with schools joining and becoming our academies last autumn in September. So far we have 4 open academies. Tomorrow it will be 5, and by the end of the summer term it'll be around 15. And so I have this joyful job as Education Director of working with some fantastic staff and principals to devise a really brilliant experience for our children. And I think having a brilliant experience for our staff is just important. So I'm just thinking, because let me just go back a bit, we have 4 principles at the Elliot Foundation, which is 4 children, 4 teachers, 4 schools, and for families and communities. And that's really important because, you know, absolutely crucially, we want our children to be leaving primary education with high levels of literacy and numeracy, because that's their gateway into the next stage of their lives. But I think to have great schools, you've got to have great staff who are really motivated to stay there, who want to do interesting things with the kids, who feel that they've got some voice in the proceedings and all of that. So it's a very interesting role for me, kind of being, in a sense, at a distance as part of the bureaucracy. It could be at its worst, but thinking my role is absolutely to make that happen, and if I fail to make that happen, no matter how good our standards are, then we're losing something in terms of our ethos. So that's where we're coming from. So trying to do that, I was thinking about CPD, because one of the questions that people asked us when they joined the Elliot Foundation is, what's it going to mean for us with CPD? And just looking around, I mean, in my previous role with Steljes and Smart, we would do our formal CPD stuff, which Catherine will say something more about there. Looking at Dougal, you know, you've run local authority CPD, as I did previously when I was in a similar kind of job. You know, and people are used to that locally sourced CPD, that they're used to that. But equally, increasingly, they're used to online activities as well. And we think very much in terms of learning platforms for children, but we've perhaps developed the kind of grids for learning less, and it's been very patchy through the country. There's been some really good stuff, there's been some patchy stuff. Then there's the specialist sharing sites like Smart Exchange, and other companies have similar sorts of things. And of course, you know, a lot of us met each other through Twitter and those similar kind of social media. We've got MirandaMods and tomorrow, of course, Teach Meets. So we have all these different forums which count as CPD. And I think it's worth, you know, thinking about how all that fits together. And I hope that that's something that people will express views about tonight. I know that Matt Pearson, for example, has just written a blog called Why Twitter Isn't CPD. And I asked about him about that today. He says, well, actually, I'm not sure. Maybe it is. Yeah. So, you know, that is, you know, that's kind of where we all are. But I wanted to think of a rich experience for our staff, thinking, well, okay, the offer has got to include a bit of all of this and make sense, still with the local piece, but also that broader thing. And how do you connect to academies that are part of the same group, but might be at the other end of the country? So that social learning piece is really important. So one of the things I'm experimenting with at the moment, and it is only an experiment, and it's worth having a look if you haven't seen it, is something called, it's called Dendrite, which is really confusing because when you look at the URL there, you've got, some of you might have even seen Fusion Learning exhibiting. In fact, they're probably here, although I haven't found them yet at Bet. And this is quite interesting because you can see our little Elliot Foundation tab there, but you've also got 2 other groups there. And so what's quite nice about that is that we can do stuff within our Elliot Foundation domain. But when I found, it was something I came across through Twitter actually, actually the other day about the Arduino and the Raspberry Pi, a little bit of research that somebody had done trying it out. And I thought, oh, that's really good, useful for people. But I thought it's actually useful for people who aren't in the Elliot Foundation. So I posted it to the whole community on this. So what's quite nice is you can get access to stuff which isn't just your own. So I thought this is good. And for our principals, who have, all of them so far, have zero experience of using any kind of social learning environment, learning platform kind of thing, on a professional level. They've just never done it before. So even using this, where all you can really do is post up and set up little discussion groups, is quite... is quite a new thing. So you can see that I am not the only person who has posted there. You can see good old Travis Latham posted something about flipped learning, which was great. So it's very much at an early stage for us, and it's really made me think, and I'm really keen to hear from other people about how we can develop that kind of environment within our own organisations, because I think that's going to be, having that talking shop is going to be really important for people. And then, of course, getting people to use things like UK Ed Chat and the various, those of us who are Twitter users, getting people to use that kind of environment and sort of selecting from it and understanding the value of finding links on things like that and then posting them up to your own platform, I think is important. So I think there's a kind of flow between what's in the kind of general white noise that there is on Twitter, perhaps filtered to some extent through these kind of hashtags, and then how do we pick from the best of that? Because I don't know about other people here, but I find by the time I've thought about my Twitter environment, and then LinkedIn is starting to become much more kind of social learning and shared postings and stuff like that now, and of course there's the LinkedIn groups, and then our academies have got Facebook pages as well, and I'm thinking you could actually spend half of your day just checking all. So I know that there are, and Leon's not with us, and what's her name, Leon's partner? What's her name? Rosie. Yeah, Rosie's the woman who's very good, I think, at pulling all of that together. But, I think it's, I'm quite into this and I still find it difficult. So our beginners, that's hard for them. So all I'm doing is really telling you all the challenges I face. But one of the things I like about UK Ed Chat, and I think it's really important to think about, is how we archive all of this. And I just wanted to post this up because I think lots of people who use the UK Ed Chat perhaps don't go to the website. And actually it's really useful, because one of the concerns I have is about reinventing the wheel, and this is really, I suppose, my last point, that when we're in that sort of Twitter environment, a lot of what we do is keep on having the same discussions as we were having a few years ago, and even some of us longer ago than that, and often you'll be talking about things at quite a shallow level. And there are fabulous researchers and practitioners, but what we tend to see is the practitioners giving like really great examples through this kind of forum. And then we've got academics in universities doing really, really deep research into quite narrow areas, but the two don't generally connect very much. So the last thing I really wanted to mention was the online communities for educators, which I was introduced to through MirandaNet and really started to get interested in when we did the thing in Prague in the spring. And the more I look into this, the more I think it's a really good space, although it's not very sexy looking, is it, unfortunately? It's got to be said,
but we will raise the money to do it. We're going round.
Hang on a minute, you need a mic, and I have to give you this. Stand behind you so the camera follows you from Iris. There we go.
Have you finished? I'm interrupting.
No, go. Make your comment.
Okay. Because it's very stable. It works very well. It's not very sexy. But if we can get over that bit, the wonderful thing about it from the university's point of view, I'm actually going out to Australia and New Zealand because people are very keen on it out there. We've got about 15 universities, and the key reason for doing it is because lots of you will know that when the government changed, they wiped all the websites of all our work, all our research, which we're having to reassemble, and we never want that to happen again. And it's all a question of ownership. They did it in ignorance more than anything else, and lack of, just didn't think it was important. And also we spoke to Bob Geldof yesterday. He was talking about Teachers TV, and currently we're raising as much money as we can through subscription, to have a site. This costs 50,000 to put together, the skin. It's part of a much bigger government site that, or ours is independent, but that's how it was designed. Marilyn Lease designed it, my colleague at Bedfordshire, Professor Lease.
That's got your camera.
Yeah, and she designed it for all the local authorities to have online communities. And for instance, a colleague has joined us from Lebanon, and it would be an ideal environment for the kinds of things you want to do, not because you haven't already got your own, but because the value of this is that when you go into there, you can contact anyone globally. And for universities, there's a major problem of firewalls and memberships, and you can't use things. But if you put stuff in Google, who does it belong to? You know, government websites get wiped because nobody cares. Politicians don't care. You put it into Google and there's big, big questions. And I can see the attraction of Google. And what we actually do is we use this as an, event organisers. Well, it does all of that. You've got all your community up there. The wiki isn't wonderful because you can't write simultaneously. So we use a Google wiki. You know, it doesn't matter. You use other tools, but have something that's central that you know you can rely on. So I'm glad you said that about that. But can I?
Sorry, I just wanted to make one more point.
Yeah, no,
if I
do,
might.
yeah.
Just to say, because Christina mentioned Marilyn Lease there, who some of you know, a Professor of Knowledge Management at Bedfordshire, and she's really pioneered this, hasn't she, and taken it through. And I think that point that you make about the connection to people all over the world, and particularly to academics, and what I like about the approach that Marilyn is developing at Bedfordshire, which she calls the mesh approach, is oh right, we're going to say the same thing, which is I've been looking at it with this last few days, and Christina's been very involved, is that it would provide a platform whereby, for example, on a page, you would see on the left, if sort of take your topic, whether it's underachievement of pupils from black and minority ethnic groups, or whether it's underperformance in maths or whatever your issue is, but you'd have like a common layout which might be what the research evidence is and links to on the left, in the middle what the characteristics are of those particular sorts of children and the sort of behaviours that you might expect to see, and on the right examples of good practice and kind of tips and tricks kind of thing. So you go from the depth to the what can I use tomorrow to help me in my classroom on one page. But even if it's the fact that you take the tip or trick for tomorrow, you can go back and review the literature and the more in-depth stuff later, and I think that is a gap that we desperately need to fill and is really important. I'm going to pass over to my colleague from Lebanon now. I've got two microphones. I'm going to put on your, this is going to make this camera follow you, so that other people, I know it sounds intimidating, but it's not. It's just so that people can see you.
Okay, I think one of the things that I want to add to what you're saying is the importance of connecting researchers in education that is non-formal, that is across universities rather than just within your university. And that is very rare, to be connected as a researcher with other researchers in education, connecting schools, because I come from a network where teachers are only together, right? So here you have teachers and researchers together across universities. That's quite unique.
And I think what we actually, what we're talking about is, you're talking about teachers and researchers. What we try to do is to help the teachers to feel that they are also researchers, that they're actually involved in the research. And one of the things that we're trying to do is the way Rachel described very well, the way the information is laid out. And the aim is, rather like a concept map, to build it all of everybody's work. Let's take creativity, which is something that John and I are working on for Europe. The idea is that as many teachers as possible post what they know, the researchers, everybody, and we're actually able to use that detail to come to some definite evidence, as definite as you can ever be with evidence, but we want to use that to be able to, like medics, nobody interferes with medics when they want to give you a heart transplant or something, you know, because they've got all their evidence. There's something called the Cochrane view, if you haven't heard of it, where doctors put all their evidence, and we're trying to do exactly the same, so that when Michael Gove says, how do you know? We know how we know. And there's so much good work going on in pockets, and the more we can add this actually internationally as well, the safer we all become from our different governments, because I feel less and less safe.
Shall we bring in some other ideas,
Yes.
some other thoughts, contributions? I'm wondering about in this kind of portal, what role there might be for products like Iris Connect. We're using the Iris camera here to film what's happening and record what's happening, but obviously in terms of CPD, there's a wider application.
Well, the thing that sort of really interests me about it is this idea of the teacher as the researcher entering a sort of action research phase, because that's the true mark of professionalism that we need to be fostering and developing. And I've sort of spent a bit of time just recently getting involved with Japanese lesson study models.
Oh yes, very interesting.
One of the things that is sort of core to the Japanese lesson study is the idea that you set a hypothesis and then work collaboratively with your peers to test that hypothesis and then to report the findings. And environments like this, I think, will be an ideal place to do that. And when we're sort of talking about reporting findings, we're actually talking about reporting effect size, because built into the core of Japanese lesson study is the skills needed to report effect size. So, you know, that's what I'm really interested in, and I think from my perspective with regards to Iris Connect, it's the ability to pull this content into our learning environment on demand based on need. So, you know, I'd like to be able to have a situation where teachers can, you know, based on their profile and what they're interested in, be able to pull selectively content from this kind of environment so that they can then get involved in a kind of coaching culture in our application to put it into practice. But anyway, so that's what I've been thinking about.
What would actually be exciting with the cameras, I think has everybody seen how you see how the cameras work, and we use them for MirandaMods, and they've been fantastic for that. But their basic use is for teachers to observe each other with their permission, not surveillance, Ofsted type stuff. But what struck me as so exciting is that really if teachers were willing to show what they're doing in the classroom when Marilyn did the teacher resource base that was also destroyed, just went, but some of her work was video, but it wasn't that easy because it wasn't part of the school culture. But with the kind of thing that you're doing, it's going to be part of the culture of the schools that are involved, and therefore we would have. I mean, the problem with trying to know how to teach well is it's dynamic, isn't it? It moves. Sometimes teachers have seen the most wonderful things, haven't they? They've looked at something and thought, I didn't know that child was doing that, or I wasn't aware that I repeat myself. Repeat, you know.
Let's bring in somebody else.
Yeah.
What's your perspective?
You can.
I just wish I knew what the magic fertiliser was that makes a community work or not. I've, over the years, set up numerous communities for groups who've actually asked me. So it's not like I'm forcing something. They say, what we need is, and I'll say, well, describe it to me, and then I provide it. Some of them work really well, and I've got a group of 17 schools where the head teachers use a community. They ask each other questions about from everything as from the which supplier do you use for your fencing through to we need a new teaching assistant in year 2, and it's fantastic the way it works. I've set up others that the tumbleweed just blows through from the first day, and despite all this experience and despite being someone who dwells and thrives in communities myself, I don't know what the fertiliser is that makes it work, and I wish I did, because that would be where we'd go from.
Sounds like magic dust.
Our lovely colleague here, Elliot, has been sent by Norbert Paschler because she's studying communities of practice, and he says, look at MirandaNet. I'm so pleased with myself today, because believe me, praise from Norbert is really good. So,
on the broader question though, Dougal, if we could just stay with you,
Okay.
if you don't mind.
stay where you are.
I'm just suggesting that we stay with Dougal at the moment, because as you said, you know, in your role working in the local authority, you've been, you know, you've often responded to demands and you've set up those online things. But how do you see the environment changing? Because obviously the local authority role starts to shift, so that's one of the factors. But also, for you to have even one community that's thriving is actually a very good thing, and a good achievement, and well done to you and to the colleagues for doing it. So how are you finding people, what do they want their CPD to look and feel like, I suppose the question is?
Well, CPD is another thing, isn't it, really? How communities work in terms of CPD is different to the way that the community I've described is. The community I'm describing amongst those head teachers is very much on a sort of a practical, let's be a supportive, advice-based community. This is another thing that I'm interested in, and I'd love to know what the magic fertiliser is. The other thing that I've been quite keen to promote is this notion of flash meeting or online environment for distance learning, for people to be able to access quality CPD without having to go to an outside centre or something like that. And again, I have set these things up and I've participated. But I don't know if the appetite is there yet, and I don't know if that's about a readiness or if it's cultural. Theo.
Don't mind.
I'll just make a quick comment. A few years ago, Christina, I and one or two other people from MirandaNet did a survey of ICT CPD. And we looked at providers, we looked at users, we looked at companies and so on. And I collected a fascinating comment from someone in a company who was tasked with promoting, selling and running CPD. And his comment was that teachers who know what they want get it and are doing it themselves already. The people who don't know don't have a clue, they don't know what they want, and effectively when they turn up for CPD, it goes over their heads because they don't have the concepts. And that might underlie Dougal's question. What makes a community work? The people who are in a community that works get it.
You can have this.
Have a con.
Yes.
Readiness to engage.
Are you doing mine now?
Yeah.
Yeah, great.
Quite interesting that. I think Dougal's raised some quite important questions here. Some communities work, some don't. Facebook works. But there's so many well-meaning educational communities on Nings, on platforms, and they get off to a good start. Some of them are quite academically focused, others are less so. But it's very, very hard to keep the interest generated. I mean, I've worked on things with JISC, worked on things out abroad. But one thing that does seem to be working at the moment, and it's really taking off, I think, in the last 6 months, is the MOOCs.
Yes.
Both the ex-MOOCs, which are sort of more like online lectures and courses, but very much the C-MOOCs.
Could you just explain what the MOOCs are, because not everybody might.
Okay, a MOOC stands for Massive Open Online Course, and there's really two types. There's ex-MOOC, which is very much a university lecture type thing, spread across the web. People watch the video lectures, do some background reading, and do assessments related to that. The C-MOOCs are a more constructivist model, where people choose a theme, and the theme's given, and there's again various readings, but people engage on Twitter and different groups and communities and different platforms and engage around that topic. There may be certification, there may not, there may be awards, but it really has brought huge community. I'm involved in one at the moment, which is Education Digital Cultures, which I think has got 360,000 participants. Now, Donald Clark says, yes, I mean, a lot of the criticism of the MOOC says there's a high dropout rate, and about 10% complete. But 10% of 360,000 is a hell of a lot. That is still a mega community. And it's an easy use of the tools at work. Plus, I think they're very, very focused common causes. But you've got to spread your net wide, I think, and then maintain interest. So how these would work, I've written a blog post try to relate how this might scale to school education. It's certainly that's something. It's not a replacement for a curriculum, but something that could maybe put on top of a curriculum and be made to work.
Is it a common? Is the reason a genuine?
Hang on a minute, Christina. There we go.
One thing I'm going to say is I'm not sure all communities. Some communities only need to be there for the time. You're not looking. Oops. Oops. They only need to be there for the time that they're required. I don't think communities should be kept alive longer than is necessary, which I perhaps ought to remember myself. But also I wonder if it is a real, genuine commitment to learning. And the ones that do last, it seems to me the people in them are committed to their own self-improvement, their own learning, and learning collaboratively. And one thing, you know that along with running a community, I'm also studying communities and looking at theory of knowledge and all that sort of thing. And I have been working with an academic, and I distinguish ourselves because this person only does academic stuff. And we wanted to test the idea in Prague. Those of you who are there, I don't know if you noticed, we wanted to test the idea in Prague that if we talked about learning and liminality and learning in a space, then everyone would want to sit quietly on their own thinking about it. So we gave you some space to think about it, and then you were supposed to collaborate. My academic friend was totally bemused and amazed because the only person who sat quietly for 5 minutes thinking about it was her. And everybody else in Miranda rushed for everyone else, got yourselves into groups, started talking about liminal space and what was that? And she said, they haven't taken time to think. I don't know quite how to answer this. Anyway, just a thought about, as that's, MirandaNet members come and go, things change and all sorts, but that was a very good cross-section of members who believe in learning from collaboration, whereas some people get rather off-put by other people's input.
No, I think that's important about the different styles. And I'm just thinking now, because we've got a colleague from Lebanon and we also have a colleague here from Germany who's not spoken yet. Who might have something to say. He's not shy.
Rubbish, absolute rubbish.
So I just wondered if what you're hearing from us echoes with your experience in... Hang on, we need the camera. Who's got the camera?
Christina, I think.
Christina.
What am I doing?
You followed. Everything you're doing is recorded.
I am staring at somebody's chest.
Here we go. No, absolutely. I didn't want to say. Okay, here you go, David.
Thanks. I think I can agree to the most points that have said or had been said already. And another point maybe is, at least in Germany, we are talking a lot about teachers, but we don't talk with them.
Very good point.
It's when I started my research and I came to them and asked, where do you need help? How can I help you? And I'd like to learn from you and watch you. It was the first time they've been asked since, I don't know, 2 decades. So maybe this can be a starting point. Just ask them and talk about them. Like, you know, this could be just one point maybe to start with.
You've made the point about the way we do our research, which is not to go into a classroom, take notes on a teacher, leave, spend 2 years writing a report that they didn't even know we were writing, so they never read it. That is just a model that seems madness to me.
But David, can I just ask you the
Yeah.
question for your regular primary or secondary school teacher in Germany? What kind of ongoing professional development do they experience?
Yeah, it's a shame to explain it. It's very formal training. The one who decides which courses are offered is the local authority, our ministry. So they decide they don't need CBD for interactive whiteboards. So there is no one. Actually, they need a lot of CBD for interactive whiteboards, but if they decide they don't need to, they don't get it. And this is just a little bit stupid, but that's the way it works actually. So.
Just to put in a word for local authority.
Oh, no.
We ask our schools
That's
what
fine.
it is they want, and then we aim to provide it. That might explain why I am one of very, very few local authority people still in work.
Can I just ask David, just to press the point, I suppose, is that bearing in mind the social learning environment, do teachers do it for themselves in Germany in the same way that we do in the UK?
I'm not sure what teachers doing here exactly. The only people I met were on Twitter, and they are absolutely brilliant. So,
Small
but
proportion.
I think you can find the German teachers on Twitter too. But this is just the persons who knows already about where you have to look for and what's going on. So there's a broad majority. I can't say something about it, and they have never been asked.
I was just going to say, you know, it's easy to get the proportion wrong. We see I think the number of teachers that are engaging in communities is probably relatively small against the whole population of teachers out there. Conscious that I'm doing what David said, we're talking about teachers, not with them. But
Well, in a sense, it's teachers as atomised individuals, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, and it's a logical consequence of everything that's come down on them, both in political terms and in managerial terms over the last 20, 25 years. I mean, much as I would like to channel all the blame at the present political administration, we have to recognise that ever since Jim Callaghan stood up and made his Rivers of Blood speech. Oh no, that was someone else. Teachers have been responsible for all of the ills of the world, and God damn it, they've got to get it ready. But I went to a discussion that we had earlier, and I won't quote you on this, and I won't put it on the concept map. But in terms of working with groups of teachers who don't get it, because we assume that the ones who do get it are going to teach meets, engaging with various communities and so on, twittering from their classroom. What percentage of the people who don't get it spend what percentage of their time telling you what's going wrong and why they can't do it?
is that a question for me?
I think Dougal should answer all the questions.
I think that's the great challenge, is the difference between those that come because they're hungry and those that you want to feed because you know they need the nourishment. And in any group, and I work with groups of teachers, there's a mixture, and I think the approach is different for both. But the one thing I think that works, and this works for a learner of 3 and a learner of 93, and that is buy-in. You know what? It's selling the what's in it for them. And most professional teachers worth their salt, you can sell learning to them, and you know this is going to make a difference to the learners, and this is why you might want to do it. And that's what you know. The same kind of principle I would employ in my classroom of 8-year-olds. Why are we doing this? Because if you can't tell me why we're doing it, we might as well not bother.
So what's the follow-up? They come along to the CPD.
I start with, why are we doing this? Why are you here? How many of you are here because you were told yesterday at 3 o'clock you're on a course tomorrow? Right, and then we deal with that first.
And then I keep asking these questions because over the last couple of days, the theme that's rolled and rolled is to get really successful CPD, it's got to be ongoing, and you've got to have an element of mentoring and coaching involved, and there's got to be a lot of reflection and involvement with the participants. And that's very difficult given the kind of CPD structure that is often rolled out and paid for. Maybe Rachel is a better person to talk about because she's setting it up in a sense from scratch.
I think there are loads of opportunities in that kind of model. I think for me, the kind of professional learning that has true impact is longer term, is practice centred, is geographically located in classrooms as a sort of a general rule. I completely agree. There are consequences though alongside it. Anyway, Rachel.
I just wanted to get a couple of examples actually of things I've seen in the last camera, thank you. Things I've seen in the last fortnight, so really fresh. One was in one of our Elliot Foundation academies, and one was an academy, a school that's not one of ours, but where we're helping out a bit. And they're both examples of what I thought was good practice. So in the second school, the one that's not one of ours, but we're working with, they've got a really stunning teacher, and this is a school where I have to say only 20% of children leave that primary school at level 4 in English and maths. That's 1 in 5 children who are going, and so 4 out of 5 children are going into secondary not equipped to be able to cope with the curriculum, which is very serious and terrible for them. Anyway, they've got this particularly outstanding teacher, and in fact we found most of their middle leaders were pretty good, and she's got a brief to coach the other staff, and I thought this is absolutely fantastic. Because she's got the ability, she's got as a practitioner herself. I mean, we saw 2 of her lessons and they were super, really, really good. And so she's got this role now where she's got 4 afternoons a week to do coaching and geared around specific individuals. And that I just thought this is absolutely wonderful but I thought that's what made me think again about the kind of academic aspect of it, because what she needs, as one of the things that we picked up was, although she's really great, she was much stronger in literacy than she was in maths, and of course in primary you're expected to be an expert in everything, and who can. And so their overall maths in this particular school is just pitched too low. Their processes in terms of coaching and monitoring and intervention actually weren't bad at all, but they just actually didn't know what good was, and their levelling wasn't so good. So I think what she needs is to be able to, key into a resource and tap into a resource where it's got really sound knowledge and content there. But I thought that was really smashing, And then I went to one of our Elliot academies on Tuesday of this week, and again a very similar model where they found that, and again it's at middle leadership, somebody who isn't preoccupied with the kind of overall sort of strategic running of the school and dealing with the outside agencies and parents and all of that, but somebody who's really focused on teaching and learning, and whose brief is to do that kind of coaching and mentoring. And so I feel that's really interesting, seeing that twice in 2 weeks, and I think that's a really good use of resource. And when we're thinking about the extra funds that things like pupil premium bring, which tend to be going into schools like those where you've got very high levels of underachievement of children from where they're not necessarily coming from homes where parents are skilled up and curious to be able to help their children, then you've got to do so much more. Then the difference it makes of having a really good teacher and having a not so good teacher is really going to impact heavily on that child's chances. So I thought, that coaching and putting some of that kind of resource into coaching every member of staff, you've got to be the very best they can, is really good. So how do we support people in that context? And it's really, I haven't got the answers, of course, but it just made me think.
Would you like to tell us what you're doing in Lebanon at the moment? So we need to bring in...
Oh, camera. You need one that's on a stick.
We should sellotape it to the microphone. That's the low-tech solution.
Okay, maybe I. I think so.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I work globally as much as I do in Lebanon. I'm based in Lebanon, and I come from a huge network of teachers, where we have 2 million students. And
So 2 million.
2 million students, yes. So for 13 years, I've been really trying to get everyone on board with global education. You learn better when you learn with someone else. You have to, and with the concept of social equity, bringing the social good, because all the projects that we were trying to do were to enhance the life of the planet and teaching. So it goes together. You learn better when you learn with someone, and you can couple it with doing good around you. And I linked all the work to the curriculum. And from there, I developed the pedagogy around it, how to work with teachers. And for 13 years, I've been doing professional development. Right now, what I'm doing specifically is I have created a framework around teaching and learning, where teachers are at the center of their own learning, doing research in their classroom, reaching there. But in order to reach there, it's all the steps. How do they know what they want to find out? How to engage them, how to motivate them. And here, maybe it answers his question, where learning is really cultural. And here, I find that the teachers, because I do a lot of international work, they're more happy in their own environment when they're in Europe or in the States. They're quite content. But if you go out abroad and you look into Africa or you look into the Middle East, really want to improve themselves. So they need that connection. So, and I can say, I don't know if you know about the researcher Ledbetter. He was learning about the extremes, and that's really, you realize how much you learn from those that have the least. It's incredible, and it's shocking. Like, I have worked with the government in Yemen, working on professional development for 4 years, and where we've taken a group of 60 teachers and educators to where they are today. You think they couldn't have reached it if they didn't really want to improve themselves, with such little technology, with such little understanding of what the world is, and how they broaden their perspective to be where they are today. Of course, you have developmental issues, and you have safety and conflict, and a lot of issues that hamper where they could have reached. But it's just to put you into the perspective of the community is at the center of their broadening. And so the professional development that I created is based on those concepts. And now I'm in the process of accrediting it and having it and studying where the change is, where the transformation is, so that is it the way teachers know, or the support they need at school, or is it the global connections that is making it so exciting at the beginning? So it's all these elements that I'm studying for the transformation of teachers, so that they become researchers and share their research on such platforms.
Really exciting work. Really exciting.
One of the MirandaNet members works in California in teacher education, Pedro Hernandez Ramos, and I listened to a paper that he gave about 6 years ago, and it was called "If Not Here, Then Where?" And at the time he was working at Santa Clara University, doing master's level programs in teaching and learning with technology. And his whole approach in the one-year course involved constructivist learning, involved all of the students doing things, working collaboratively, using ICT in the most supportive way. And it was very successful. 100% completion rate, everybody got really good marks, everybody was fully involved. And as part of the evaluation, he went back to the schools in which the people were working a year after the course. And he was doing project learning in the course, and the aim was that this is the way the teachers would work. Now, the schools in which the teachers were working didn't lack any technology at all. All of the kids had their own technology. Lots of them brought it to school. Silicon Valley, very well endowed, lots of support from all of the tech companies. And what he found was the usual split that you would expect if you went into any school at any time and looked at the ways in which teachers were using digital technology to support learning. A third were using it in everything. It had changed their pedagogy completely.
Watching you trying to do things that are new to you, and unless you've been involved right from the outset in the development of the new style of teaching, all you've done is go to a course and you've been told how to do it. This is the technique, these are the materials, look at this video. Translating that into your own practice is a public thing. And I think that is a real inhibitor for many teachers, because the last thing a teacher enjoys doing is failing in front of their own students. As much as they should at times fail in front of their own students, it is a real difficulty.
Yeah, I take your point. The problem is, of course, that a lot of teachers don't realise that they're failing and assume that they're being successful.
Well, that's true as well. Now, if there is a way for those who are confident in adopting the new strategies, new approaches, can help those who want to do it but are still struggling. And I think it comes back to a point that you said earlier, which is about it's the ongoing support which becomes the critical aspect, to keep going back to people to ensure that they are developing their practice and gaining in confidence, and therefore strengthening the work that they're doing with their children. The children are benefiting from it.
So maybe this is where Andy can maybe give us some more examples of the way.
Well, I was just thinking, Andy, as well, that obviously you've now got experience of that kind of approach.
Sorry, here you go.
Yeah, I was just thinking, you've had that experience of that kind of approach now, and that particularly that coaching over a long, over extended periods. And I was wondering whether the experiences that has helped embed the change, because I thought it was fascinating, the example that you just gave there, John, how people then reverted to type, as it were, and I was, so you start to beg that question: to what extent is it relational, and is it to do with that having that person who's supporting you in some other way, not just about knowing what to do, but your feelings about it as well.
Well, it seems, there's just sort of two components that we've noticed. The first one is that it's a bell curve where you have innovators, early adopters, early majority, and laggards. You know what I mean? There's a bell curve there. And actually, the danger with innovations is when you get the wrong mix of people using it initially. And I wonder if that feeds into the idea of why certain social networks work and others fail. There's nothing worse than it just sitting in the hands of innovators, being geeky and not having the capacity to communicate the value to everybody else. In fact, what you want in a lot of scenarios, we've noticed this with, we're trying to implement Iris Connect, are people in that early adoption group who don't necessarily fit that profile but do have credibility with everybody else. So that was one reflection. The other thing is that innovation in isolation is extremely difficult. One of the things that obviously the advent of network technologies allows us to do is really personalise the experience of people. And an example comes from the PhD research that sat behind the development of Iris, which was my colleague Sean Edmondson. And we had a control group and an experimental group looking to put into practice an education innovation. It was actually mathematics manipulatives. And one group had the same number of hours of traditional CPD delivery, and the other had the same number of hours of a kind of focused coaching approach. And the difference between the groups was very substantial in terms of the amount that they actually got into practice. Around 5% of the teachers in the control group got the mathematics strategy effectively into practice in the classroom, and around 95% in the coaching group got the practice embedded. But the real interesting part of that was a case study, which was that on both sides of that research and control group, one teacher had the same problem, which was that the process of handing out the manipulatives at the start of the lesson disrupted the first 10 minutes of their lesson. So the one in the control group who got no in-class support never tried it again because it ruined her lesson. In the research group, the coach at the end of the lesson said, just nip down to the school stores, get 20 egg boxes, put the manipulatives in the egg boxes and hand them out on the door. She is now a coach of that strategy within that particular group of schools. And so, it brings to mind that notion of, for want of a nail, the shoe is lost. For the want of a shoe, the horse is lost. And for the want of the horse, the rider is lost. And, it's about being able to be so personalised in our support, to be able to spot these tiny little things that get in the way of a really important change in someone's classroom
and the
practice.
Support need not necessarily be linked to ICT.
Oh no,
it's
absolutely.
Behavioural.
I mean, the one thing that the support can do, the one thing ICTs can do, sorry, just come on back on that point, is it can reduce the cost of that support. Not every teacher can have a personalised coach, but in a sort of Chris Anderson long tail kind of way, we can reduce the cost of interactions.
I'd just like to add one little point. We are talking about a lot of change and culture, but my fear is we are starting too late. We should start at universities with the students who want to become teachers. And I don't know much about your universities and how you prepare teachers, but some of our educational departments is just 100 years old lecture style. And we are just generating the next generation of teachers. And yeah, it's just, we should prepare them earlier. And
well, I could just chip in on that, David, to say, well, we've got we're going through change in the UK now, because conventionally teacher education did sit, predominantly in higher education, in universities and institutes of higher education. But now there's a very clearly stated government priority to move teacher education into schools. Through two means, partly for high flyers through Teach First, who go through a very short training of a couple of months post-graduate when they graduate, and then go directly into schools and go on a programme for 2 years while they're in school, and then secondly through teaching schools will over the next period take on that responsibility, which in principle has got many benefits of people spending time in schools. However, a number of us I think would have some concerns that you kind of go from one extreme to the other, from a 100-year-old very academic perhaps and not realistic approach to one where actually there's no theoretical grounding for in terms of theories of learning and those other sort of very important considerations that need to be part of teacher education. But that's probably a discussion for another day in terms of initial teacher education. I just wanted to make the point that our provision is very, very different, and I expect it differs very much globally from one country to another. So, any more general? What I'm just thinking, we're kind of at time now. We're just about an hour, so I'm going to pass over to Christina to make closing remarks.
That was an instruction.
It was. I'm very obedient.
One of the only thing I wanted to pick up was what you said about learning from people who don't have as much as we do in the West, and John and I and other people in MirandaNet, we've had the real privilege of working in Africa, in Brazil, in China, not only in places where the culture is very different, India as well, but where the access to this kind of technology is very different. And it reminds us all the time how much we take so much for granted. And you're absolutely right that the things that we moan about in the West, I need to keep reminding myself, because I'm as bad a moaner as anyone else, but when you see what people are struggling with and working with and putting so much effort into the kind of work that they're doing. When I first went to Russia, I used to joke that they're do miracles with computers that they'd made themselves that were held together with elastic bands. You know, I mean, it's some of the things we've seen are really, really stunning, and I think there's such a lot to learn from that. So I do agree with you on that point, and that's why we also set up World e-Citizens after the events of 9/11, so that young people can learn from each other as well. So it's just another way of trying to share that sort of knowledge. There's just a couple of people three people haven't spoken. Did you want to say anything?
I was really interested in the comments about teaching, what I did. I thought that on the whole thing, the Africa thing that you concluded is probably more relevant is something we've just started working with a township in Cape Town, and I think that's one of the things that technology is bringing around, is the idea that once you start crossing borders, and technology does allow that, and there is a bit of a lot of a digital divide, but also there's a cultural divide. And I think one of the points that was going around that people were discussing in terms of who the teachers are and what teachers do and who takes this on and who doesn't, a lot of that is down to, you know, I know you mentioned the great teacher in one of the schools. Great teachers, they may be the one that takes on technology, but they may be the one that really doesn't like technology and can see no value of it. And there's an element of that technology is just part of what we do, not necessarily the whole thing. But in reaching those different areas, so that, you know, the thing that we've got in Cape Town, it would be impossible for us to get there without technology. So it does allow that in, and maybe it changes actually the people that teach, you know, and what kind of people go into teaching and what kind of skills that we have as teachers and that we value as teachers. And there's a fundamental shift in who we become and what skills are valued and what skills can be transferred across those borders.
Yeah, and thank you for that. We don't know your name.
Peter Shuki.
Oh, hello.
Hello.
Sorry, I don't know what anyone looks like, do I?
No, that's the thing.
Nice to see you. A new member. We've been exchanging online. Of course, I haven't seen you before. And one of the other things I want to say about the digital divide that you mentioned is where we have travelled. We must remember that the digital divide is not between the West and other countries. The massive digital divide in our country, and I mean digital literacy type divide, and in many of the countries that we work in, where we never know quite what the words are. Are they underdeveloped, you know, pre-developed? None of the words seem quite right, but there's always a group of politicians, rich people or whatever, who have access to everything. And it's terribly important to remember that.
The word that you're searching for is the impact of class on...
Yes, yes. John often mentions this. I should have remembered. You did right. Two others of you haven't spoken. Did you want to make any comments?
Yeah, show you something.
Yes, yes.
So if you put this here, with any chance that's moving there. Yeah. Hi. Oh, I'm David Newman. Just a couple, there's not time to talk about theory, but just a couple of practical hints following up some earlier things. I remember you were talking about using this technology with the videoing in professional development. Here's a thing called Coach's Eye. You make a video recording, and then as you play it back, you can add your own marks, you can record your own thing, and pass it back to the person you've just recorded. And they get a spot-by-spot, time-by-time direct commentary, which initially was designed for sports coaching, but we've actually, in my last job, they were trying it out for negotiation classes in Oxford University. Right, second thing I wanted to show you, continuing professional development, it's always worth looking at what other professions do. This is how people in local authorities and government do their continuing professional development. A shared Moodle site run by a company in Derry called Learning Pool, where different local authorities build modules and they share it with each other. So that's this, of course, is something of a lower level because it's learning particular skills, particular bits of the job you need to do. It isn't necessarily going to tell you to be innovative or start doing challenge-based learning everywhere. You know, that was that, and the final thing to show you, I have no idea how it could help in this, but it's interesting. Yeah, hold that. Right, this is just showing what's through the camera on the other side. Let's see, and if I just get it right, and lighting's all on. Here. It might not work with your camera. Let's get it working here first. There we are. Now let's see if I can keep this going on the camera.
Or Raspberry.
Yeah. So I actually use that to do an augmented reality exhibition of the 50th anniversary of the Consultancy in Oxford, where people could see the connections between what it was like 50 years ago and what it was like now. So those are the.
No. Theo, you've got the last word. Okay. David just reminded me of something I was looking at when you said what other professions.